Howdy YouTube, Esnix here with a look at QNX. Oh, let me get rid of this thing here. I'll get to my YouTube channel a little later after I do the video. So, what I'm going to look at today is QNX. Now, QNX is a real-time operating system. It started development by, a group of graduate students back in 1982, the initial release, at least according to Wikipedia here. And it was developed to enable the production of real-time software on x86. Back then it was the IBM PC. And it's now a very Unix-like system. However, it is a true microkernel, with most of the operating system running as servers on top of a very small kernel. Now, the kernel, I believe, provides IPC, or inter-process communication, as well as timers, scheduling, and that's about it. Now, the servers provide file systems, graphics, and everything else, networking, everything else operating system needs. So QNX Neutrino was released back in 2001. I believe that was 6.0. And at that time, QNX briefly open sourced their operating system. Now, when BlackBerry purchased QNX, they closed down that open source project there. But for a couple of years, QNX was getting some traction in the open source world, and a lot of interest. I think gateway computers back in the early 2000s or late 90s had approached QNX to build the next generation Amiga operating system, because Gateway at that point owned the rights to the Amiga. If we can read about the history. Gordon Bell and Dan Dodge, students at University of Waterloo in 1980, were the ones who came up with QNX. And it's been in the industry, the real-time industry, ever since. They develop software that's used in automobiles, in medical devices, in industrial and scientific devices, in railroad control systems. So it is a very well used and very well known in the industry operating system. Now, when BlackBerry bought it, the BlackBerry phones switched over to using QNX as the underlying OS on BlackBerries. So QNX also, I think, was used briefly by 3Com as the basis for a internet appliance back in the early 2000s as well, when when Oracle was touting the inevitability of the network computer rather than the full desktop computer. The network computer was supposed to be a thin client to utilize the internet without a full computer, just enough to browse and use the internet. And a number of products at that time. I believe Sony had one out briefly based on BOS, and 3Com had one out based on QNX. It was just a graphical browser, basically. And you can read about all this history. What we're going to do is take a look at installing an old version of QNX. Now, what I've done is I've downloaded from QNX's website the QNX Momentix Development Suite 6.3.2 Neutrino host. Now, as a development suite, QNX Momentix can run under Linux, can run under Windows, or can run under its own Neutrino operating system. So that's what we're going to take a look at. And the reason I chose 6.3.2 is because it's an old enough version. You can see release 2007, so it's 10 years old. Just over 10 years old now. But it still has all the components and all the features that I was used to when I was playing with QNX back when 6.0 came out, 6.1, 6.2, everything from about 2000 to 2002. So QNX 6.3.2 came out, I believe, originally in 2003. So I'm not sure why this date is 2007. Maybe that was when it was made available as a download. Now, you could run this system live off the CD. It's a pretty small download. It's only 542 megabytes. Or you can install it. Now, in order to install it, we do need a license key. Now, I was able to find a license key just doing a Google search. So if you're interested, just search for QNX 6.3.2 license key. You'll probably find the one or two that I found. I'm not going to, when we install this, I'm not going to display the license key, but you could certainly find it about as easy as I found it. So let's take a look at the installation of QNX Neutrino. Now I have here in VirtualBox a slightly scaled screen, enough to see well. And when you run the ISO or CD, if you're running this on real hardware, you get a prompt to either run from the CD or install it to a new disk partition. Now we're going to pick F3 to install it. And now we get a choice of just to continue or to set verbose mode. So we're just going to continue, and we'll get our prompt for our license key. So at this point, I will type it in off screen and come right back. Okay, we are back. So I typed in the license key and just hit enter. And now we have to accept our license. So let's do that. Okay, so now we have to pick our hard drive we're going to install QNX on. Now, when you do this, if you do it on real hardware, you're going to want to partition the hard drive before you start. Either set up a partition or just go with a totally blank hard drive. That's what we're doing here in VirtualBox. So I'm going to select the disk we want to use. And now we're going to select a partition type. So 79 is the default. But as QNX developed, they used several partition types for various versions of their system. So 79 is probably the most current as of the release of this version of QNX. So let's hit F1. And we're going to use all available space. Now, if you don't want to use all available space, you're going to want to enter a size or delete a partition. I think you will get dumped into FDisk if you go into any choice other than use all available space. So let's do F1. And it's copying the installation files. Now these are image files of the system that it will then extract. So let's say yes because we want to install to the default location. And we're going to say yes because we do want the GNU Public License Utility Package. And now it's going ahead and extracting the installation to the proper file system places. Now, QNX, the Neutrino operating system, is really just a vehicle for development of real-time software. You'll see that it provides a desktop environment, but it's really only a tool to develop software. It really wasn't meant to be, say, a full-time desktop operating system, in that there was never a whole lot of software. There were the basics, and while it was open source, there was the beginning of a community being built up around it, and open source software being ported from Unix to QNX. So let's hit enter, and now we're going to remove our hard disk image and reboot. So boot partition 1, just hit enter. So it's loading up the kernel, probably. Now QNX, the RAM, the init RAM that it uses is a combination of the kernel and drivers and any programs that one needs or wants available in the boot. So let's go select. Let's go and select that. See if we get decent color and resolution. So let's go and test it. So that's good. So at the moment, let's go ahead and scale back our view to 100% and continue. Very good. So let's move this in the center. And the login is simply the word root for the user without a password. So here you see we have our desktop, and it's a very graphical desktop. QNX provides what is called the Photon GUI, which is their GUI. So let's go ahead and pick our time zone here. See, all the way at the bottom we have USA. We can also pick our language, which should be US English, our keyboard, and our time and date. So we're done. Now the license key I found looks like it activates some of the components, but not all. We're just going to activate later. Now it does load its own browser, but I'm going to quit that right away because I noticed that it can't connect to QNX's website, and then it becomes unresponsive, and eventually we have to kill the process. It's a pretty old browser, and it doesn't work well with the modern web. We'll get to the other browser available here in a moment or two. Let's take a look around the desktop. So we have our standard launch button or start button equivalent in the lower left corner, and you can see there's a demo, there are games, columns is a Tetris style game. The others are pretty obvious from their names. Peg is like a Chinese checkers game, and the others should be pretty self-explanatory. Internationalization provides Chinese, Japanese, and Korean input methods. Under Internet, we have Connect for basic network settings, or actually to connect to a remote host, so it's not basic network settings. Let's see, there is a dialer for dial-up, and there's a Mozilla web browser. So let's open that up. You can see it can't securely connect to blackberry.qnx.com, but it is Mozilla 1.6. And if you notice, it's the actual full Mozilla suite, not just the browser. So we have built-in email, Composer, address book, and chat client. All. So it's like, what's the product now? SeaMonkey, right? Or the old Netscape Communicator product. So let's close that off. And we can get to Google. Yeah, we can. So I don't know what other websites we're going to be able to get to, but you can play around with this and see if it works on the modern web. I don't think it'll work too well for most of the web, though. So let's close that. Under multimedia, we have a basic audio player. Now, it looks like it's based off of XMMS. And if we right-click on the title bar, we can get to some options here. Let's see what else we got. Under multimedia, there's a media player and a sound recorder. There's the development suite. And then some utilities. So we get our basic calculator, our screen capture, the file manager, a find tool. Okay, didn't mean to click on that. Image viewer, photon region viewer, and we'll get to that in a moment. Print manager, terminal, and text editor. Under configure, we can activate licenses, add a license, change the appearance, change the audio settings, desktop assistant, display settings, which we looked at during setup, fonts, locale, mouse, remote, screensaver, TCP/IP. So here is where we'd set our network connections. Let's see what else. Users and groups and workspace menu. So we can rearrange our menu if we want. Then the installer is how you would install software. It's not a system installer, it's a package manager basically. So if the web repository were still online, we could do that. Or if we had a local repository, we could go browse that. And if we had any CD-ROMs, QNX CDs, those would show up as well. And that's how you would look at software. Pretty cool. Does all the basics. So that's our menu. And then there's always help. There is quite a bit of help. So that's all good to read up on QNX. Now over on the right here, we have what's called the shelf. And in the shelf is a combination of a duplication of the launch button menu and some more utilities. Let's take a look at the, we already looked at the file manager. No, we didn't. Let's look at the file manager. So we have our file manager. And if we take a look at the root directory, we can see the file system layout is very similar to standard Unix file system here, with some notable differences. The first being the FS directory is where mounts would happen, CD-ROMs. I don't know if USB mounts work, and I'm not really testing that in VirtualBox, but I don't know if a USB flash drive would be recognized or not. If you have any info on this, chime in the comments. So let's see what else is here. Another interesting component of the file system is the x86 directory, which you can see has almost all the same folders as the root. Now in the x86 directory, here is the installed system that is read-only. It doesn't change. I believe in the root, what changes is overlaid on top of the file system. So the base of the system, which is read-only, stays secure and safe and intact, and any changes made are overlaid on top of it. It's a concept that I'm not particularly familiar with too well, but I believe that's a simplified way that it works. And the file manager is pretty standard here. And go into preferences and show hidden files and set a whole bunch of options here how the file manager works. So there's the region view, and the region view is an interesting view because it shows running processes as a graphical representation in the screen. Now, the graphics driver you can see is in red, and it includes the entire screen. And then all the components on the screen are broken down, what's controlled by the window manager and what's other. And you can look at a side view or a top view. Here's a top view. You can see there's the graphics driver, there's the window, and then there are a number of other processes, and then window manager processes. And what I find interesting is there's some yellow lines, but no yellow key for what the yellow color means. And then the top view. So an interesting world view of Photon. Photon, as I said, is the GUI on top of QNX Neutrino. What else is here? System information. This is your process viewer in QNX, graphical process viewer. And you can see all the processes running in the system. And what's taking up the most amount of CPU. So let's go to one of them here. Let's go to Voyager, which is the web browser that QNX developed. And I thought I killed it or closed it, but it still seems to be running here. We can see the number of threads. We can see the memory space it's using, broken down by components of the process. It's not a process. It's these would be the processes, the threads. Well, no, there's only one thread. These would be the components, the memory used by component within this process. Okay, I think I got that right. And then we can look at other aspects of this running process here. Now, all of this information is probably really useful for programmers And it's a little interesting to look at, but I don't know enough about the system to know exactly what these mean and why it's might be helpful to be able to access this information. But the process viewer is pretty slick here. If we wanted to kill a process, we can right click. No, we can't right click. I thought we could. We can go to File. No. We can go to Action. There we go. And we can slay a process. So let's try doing that. And it killed it pretty quickly. Boom. It's done. Voyager has been slayed. Pretty cool. You can see there's a mixer as well. So you can look at the playback settings, look at the recording settings. Not bad. Under Configure, we have the same configure options as in the menu. If we go to Appearance, we can change the background. Now there's a couple here to look at. Now this background, if you've ever run older QNXs, QNX 6, 6.1, 6.2, this was the standard background here. So that's nice. I like that. That feels at home. We can also change the window border style here. So let's go to Spruce. Now we have a green window border. Go to Eggplant. That seems to work well with this background, so let's leave that. Let's go back to Appearance quickly because I want to look at something else here. Under Window, we can turn on and off full window dragging, and we can enable multi-monitor placement. Pretty cool. Let's see. What else can we look at? If we go to Shelf, we can rearrange or add and remove items from the shelf. And let's see, Users. Oh, this is kind of fun. Our default user image is this guy with glasses, but we can also pick others. Let's try Face 4. There we go, a slightly balding, darker skinned guy here. So it's kind of fun. You can play with, there we go, a blonde, if you wanted a blonde person there. That looks like our standard guy. There's another blonde, different shirt color. Notice almost all of them are wearing glasses, except for that guy. Okay. So that's a quick look around. Okay, let's finish up here. We have System Monitor. Shows CPU usage, memory usage, network usage, and disk activity. We have quick access to our CD player if we wanted to play music. And we have World View, which lets us switch to virtual desktops. So, and then we have a clock all the way at the bottom. If we click on the clock, we got our settings here, date and time. Looks like all of our settings. Okay, language, time zone, keyboard. You can right-click on the desktop and get a menu as well. So very minimal menu here. Get to the installer, get to multimedia stuff, get a terminal, get configure options here. So we can configure this menu. Pretty cool. Let's open up a terminal because we got a basic shell here. And many of the commands, I believe, are what you get on a Unix system running SH. So, LS works, CD works. So the basics, I can play with. I don't think uname works. Oh, uname gives us QNX. Uname A gives us the system. Pretty cool. So we can see this build was 2006. So I got my years wrong here. This must have been a 2006 release. Not bad. Let's exit. And that's my look at QNX. Hopefully a lot easier to follow when I'm not holding the camera in front of the screen and jittering it and unfocused shots. You get nice, clean screen capture this way. So let's close down QNX. We can log out and shut down the system. So it ends the system cleanly. And this was not used to ACPI or APCI motherboards here. So it shut down the system, but we have to turn off the computer. So at this point, we just hit the power button. And that's it. That's my look at QNX 6.3.2 Neutrino for, Neutrino. Hope you enjoyed this, and if you're interested, go grab the image, go play with it in VirtualBox or on real hardware. Now, this VirtualBox has 1 gig of memory and a 4 gig hard drive, and it was plenty of room. Just so you know. Bye-bye.